Hello, assalamu alaikum, everyone. I am coming to you live from my basement, being careful to keep out of view the mess my kids made and the dead orchid in the background. Yay! It's me, Leah, again, and today I'm going to talk about everyone's favorite topic, marriage. Shortly before I got married to my husband, I attended this back before remote was a popular thing, back in the old days. I attended this remote lecture about marriage that Yasmin Mujahid was part of, and there was a part where they had taken a break, but they forgot to mute themselves, which is such a funny and common story now, but this was like the real original. And they were talking about how their talk must be so popular because it's about marriage, and if it had been about the 5 pillars, it wouldn't be so popular. So they kind of, I don't know, that was a little bit embarrassing for them because those are the things that you think in your head that you're not supposed to say out loud to everyone listening. But anyway, so that's my story. I'm sticking to it. And if this is a popular talk, I'm just going to assume it's for the same reasons. Because honestly, what topic do Muslims love to talk about more than marriage? And so I guess I'll start there. Everyone knows the very, very well-known hadith, excuse me, that says marriage is half your deen, which I mean, I would encourage people not to take that quite so literally because there is another hadith that says cleanliness is half your deen. So if we're going to be mathematical about it, you just need to be clean and married and you've completed your deen. And I think that we all know that's not really how it is. I think that by saying marriage or cleanliness is half your deen, it was just the Prophet's way of talking about how important and sacred it is. And it's not meant to say, and again, this is my opinion. I'm not a scholar, but I'm allowed to have opinions, and so my opinion is that the intention of saying this isn't to be like, okay, marriage is half your deen. That means you need to get married, because if you don't, you're failing at your deen. I don't think that's what it means at all. I think what it means is marriage is sacred in this religion. Marriage is important in this religion, so you need to do it right. Getting married isn't the end goal. It's having a healthy marriage. You can't just be married and say I've completed half my deen if you're being a bad spouse. So, to be specific, the topic today is how do I pick a good spouse and not regret? And let me just do my signature checking my watch so I don't go over. Now, I will say, alhamdulillah, I've been married for 8 years. Everyone say mashallah, please. And I love my husband very much, and I think that we generally have a good relationship. Now, if anyone is going to tell you that their relationship is perfect, they're a liar, okay? We have our problems just like anyone. We go through rough times just like anyone. We fight just like anyone. And so when I got this topic, I was thinking to myself, how on earth am I qualified to answer this question? How do I know how to pick a good spouse? It's like a lot of it is chance and just like hoping for the best. And so there you go. There's your advice. The end. We're going to end this now. I mean, that is part of it, because I've heard stories of people who just have, what people refer to as love marriages, which is, what me and my husband have. Arranged marriages where they didn't even meet each other until the night of the wedding. Marriages arranged through the family, marriages arranged through a mosque. You meet through school or, whatever. And there are people who have done it in each of those ways who had a great experience, and people who have done it in each of those ways that had a terrible experience. So the best thing you can do is equip yourself with knowledge and a good solid head on your shoulders before embarking on whatever journey you want to. I mean, whatever path to marriage, if marriage is your goal. Now, I'm going to first start off with saying there is no evidence anywhere that I've ever seen that marriage is required. There have been many, many scholars, male and female, throughout the history who have remained unmarried their whole lives, and that is fine. Just because, we've got this hadith that says marriage is half your deen, people overemphasize it, like I said. And so I'm never going to be the one to take the position that marriage is required. But that being said, we're talking about getting married today, so I'm going to presume everyone who's watching is interested in that. Now, one discussion that I see a lot, especially because in North America, where I live, there's a huge, diverse diaspora of Muslims from a bunch of different cultures. There are Muslims who Black Muslims who are descended from enslaved people. There are, convert cultures. There are immigrants from Eastern Europe. There's, in my area, there's a huge population of Arab Muslims. And then in some suburbs north of where I live, there's a lot of Indian, Pakistani Muslims. It's a huge diversity. So everyone sort of brings their own cultural norms to the table. Now, it is common in a lot of different Muslim cultures for people to meet their spouse through family arrangements. I hesitate to call it an arranged marriage because arranged it sort of, to me, it implies a little bit of a lack of consent. Like, this is your spouse, this is who you're going to get. So when I say arranged marriage, that's what I mean. But I'm talking about, getting arranged, like having an arrangement to meet someone through your family. It's a little bit lower, I would hope. I'm sure there are times when it's high pressure, but oftentimes it's lower pressure because it's your family. You assume they're looking out for you, for your best interests. And again, I do want to make clear there are abusive situations in every different method of finding a spouse. Sometimes, I know Muslims don't like to admit it, but there are bad parents who do not have their children's best interests at heart. And in those situations, I'm not saying that just because you're getting a spouse through your family or meeting a spouse through your family, it's going to be smooth sailing. That's not it at all. I just want to make that disclaimer real quick. But anyway, so there's that way. I recently heard, which I don't want to speak with authority and say this is a North American phenomenon, but I'd never heard of this before, of having like meeting a spouse through a mosque arrangement, like asking, whoever runs your local mosque to help you meet a spouse, which is not something I had heard of before. Then I think two of my husband's brothers just met their wives at school. And, I met my husband online, and his other brother is still single, so we'll see what happens with him. But the reason I'm addressing all these different ways is there's a tendency for Muslims to see the way that they do it, the way that their culture normally does it, and say, this is the right way, this is the Islamic way. And that's really viewing a huge, vast religion with a ton of diversity with a really narrow lens. So there's this concept in Islam. I'm not going to pronounce it right, but it's something like urf. In English, it's spelled URF, and that means like cultural practice. And the implication of it in the faith is that cultural practice is something that is allowed. You are allowed to be Muslim and bring your own cultural norms into it as long as it doesn't go against Islam. And so meeting people through school, meeting people through your MSA or even online or however, as long as it's not going against Islam, then that is an Islamic way. It's okay. There are a lot of different ways to meet your spouse. There's no one right way. So having this sort of, centered, self-centered around your own cultural norms saying that's the Islamic way. I mean, that's just not true. So your first step to finding a good spouse without regretting it is doing it in a way that you're comfortable with, that you have confidence with. So there's your first step. That can be, a very, you can have very diverse ways of starting the process, like I said. But something that I think needs to apply to everyone, no matter what, is you need to get to know who your spouse is as a person, who your potential spouse is as a person. Someone said recently to me in a group I'm a part of that it is, this isn't a direct quote, but they were basically saying it seems like people try to prove their piety by marrying a stranger. And I thought that was really powerful because there have been, sorry, my kids are upstairs and I'm trying to make sure they're not getting into too much trouble. There have been some people I've known who sort of take it as a point of pride, like, oh, I didn't meet my spouse until the day we were married. And that's not necessarily a point of pride. That doesn't, like, alhamdulillah, that worked out for them. But it doesn't work out for everyone. And it doesn't make you more pious than someone who spent months or even years trying to get to know their spouse before committing to a lifetime with them. Remember, again, getting married isn't the goal. Sustaining marriage is the goal. And even more specifically, sustaining a healthy and happy marriage is the goal. So if you're looking to spend your whole life with someone, you can't just go in on blind faith. Again, like I said, it's almost always going to come up in the talk that I gave 2 days ago about tying your camel. We aren't meant to just have blind faith at any given moment and just blindly, throw our belief to God and have faith and do nothing else. Like that's not Islamic. And just in case anyone is confused, I'm referencing the hadith where there was a man outside of the mosque, and the Prophet ﷺ asked if he was going to tie his camel for fear that she would wander off. And the man said, no, I have faith in Allah. And the Prophet said, tie your camel and then have faith in Allah. So that's what I'm referencing. And it comes up so often because it's such a very useful hadith. And this is a philosophy that should be applied to looking for a spouse as well. You aren't proving anything by not getting to know your spouse, and the less you get to know them, the more likely you will find that there are things you don't like about them. Now, there are people who barely knew their spouse before marriage and it worked out well for them. In fact, the people who introduced me to Islam, they met on the day they were married. I saw wedding pictures, and I remember saying to the wife, I was a young Muslim at the time, and I was like, wow, like that must have been kind of exciting. And she was like, it was terrifying. I was very scared. And so even though, alhamdulillah, their marriage worked out and they always seemed so lovely together and very sweet, it's not like that for everyone. So getting to know your spouse is so important, and it needs to be more than things like, do you pray 5 times a day? Do you eat halal meat? Do you fast? Those aren't real questions. Like, this is again something people like to do, like, oh, I'm so pious, I care about their practice as a Muslim and nothing else. That's not smart. There are many, many terrible and abusive people who still pray 5 times a day. That's not a good measure of if someone is going to be a good spouse, or even if they're going to be a good Muslim. If you want to find a spouse that you feel confident you're going to want to spend the rest of your life with them, you need to know more than if they pray and fast. It's not a mark of piety to be content with knowing these teeny tiny basics. You need to decide what is important to you in a spouse, and don't talk about superficial things Think about what you need in a person who's going to be a partner to you. For it, and this could go for anyone, but especially for women, is your future spouse going to be supportive of you having a career if that's what you want? Are they going to be supportive of you being a stay-at-home parent if that's what you want? Are they going to be expecting you to quit school after you have kids or whatever? Whatever the case may be, these things need to be out on the table. And a lot of times I've heard stories of families keeping their daughter's ambitions hidden or whatever because that might be seen as a deterrent. And so then, this poor woman is trapped in a situation where she's expected to give up school or give up her job or whatever. And she was never really given the option of having a spouse who would be supportive of her. If something that is important to you, be that education, be that be that having kids, maybe, or not having kids, if something like that is going to be a deterrent, all the more reason to talk about it before marriage. Because if it's a deterrent to someone, then you don't want to end up married to that person. You don't want to end up married to someone who's not going to be supportive of what you want. And I'm talking mostly about, I'm using examples of women. It works both ways for men and women. If, for example, a man is interested in, it could be any of the same thing. It could be any of the same things. But if he's interested in, working overseas and his wife, this woman he might be marrying isn't okay with that, that needs to be discussed ahead of time. It's not fair to trap someone in a situation where they're unhappy. It's not fair. And while these things can apply to both men and women, if it would be very naive of us to pretend that there isn't some sort of power differential in Western and non-Western societies between men and women. So while these things do apply, I'm frankly more concerned with the experiences of women because we are more often trapped in situations that are difficult to get out of, particularly if our spouse is the only person who's earning any money. So the big, most important takeaway, which is what I'm talking about now, is make sure that you know what you're getting into. Ask uncomfortable questions. If the uncomfortable questions, and I'm repeating myself, if the uncomfortable questions are a deterrent, then you don't want to end up married to this person anyway. Please, please, for the love of all things, the goal isn't to get married. The goal is to get married to the right person. There are these really toxic beliefs among Muslims that there seems to be an expiration date on people. If you're not married by X age, then there's something wrong with you. What is this? What is this? Is this the 17th century? Do we have expirations? This is incredible. I personally wouldn't want to be married to a person with that kind of attitude. Anyway, going on a bit of a tangent, but it's related. So get to know the person that you want to marry, that you think you want to marry. Ask uncomfortable questions. Talk about uncomfortable things. Now, I have seen a particular belief, and it's a little bit nuanced, but I've seen this circulating that we are not under any obligation to tell our future spouse about our past sins. Now, this is true. And again, it's especially important for women. People say this, and I think it's a means to protect women. Some of us may have had indiscretions when we were young, and we are under absolutely no obligation to inform a future spouse about that. It is not their business, unless it affects them somehow. Now, it does not affect you if your spouse is not a virgin when you marry them. That does not affect you. I don't care how much you think it does. You're wrong. It doesn't affect you. If your spouse contracted a disease, that might affect you. If the disease isn't curable, if it's contagious, that would affect you. That kind of thing needs to be disclosed. But you are under no obligation to inform people of your past sins if that's not something that you want to. Now, if you're comfortable enough with a person and you feel like this isn't something you could hide from a spouse, you can. people take this whole concealing the sins thing too far, much too far. And it enables the propagation of abuse in our community because we say things like, oh, maybe that person is a sexual predator, but we should cover up our sins. No. Now, that's not necessarily what I'm talking about in relation to marriage. But I digress. The point is, you can, if you feel like it's important to get it off your chest, you can tell your future spouse, but you're not obligated to, and you have no business asking a future spouse about their past sins. You are not pure as the driven snow. You are not without sin, and neither is your future spouse. So, to sum up what we've covered so far, number one, remember that the goal isn't to get married, it's to get married to the right person, if you even want to get married. Number two, start the process using a method that you are comfortable with, not one that other people are telling you should be comfortable with. And number three, the absolute most important point so far, and probably for the rest of the talk, is to get to know the person you think you're interested in marrying. These are not foolproof. There is no advice I can give that's foolproof that can guarantee, that that can guarantee that you will not regret your choice in spouse. There's nothing foolproof. You can do your best, take all the steps possible, do as much screening as possible. Don't be afraid to be picky, but be picky for the right reasons. If you find someone who's absolutely perfect for you, but they struggle with their prayers, that's fine. Oh, okay, sorry, I was just reading a comment that's confusing me. Anyway, I lost my train of thought. I always do that. It's like the hallmark of me doing these live sessions is at some point I shall lose my train of thought. And I completely don't remember what I was saying. So I'm going to just continue on a different thread. And I apologize for that. If this person making a secret comment to your spouse shouldn't constitute a divorce, yeah, easy not to say. If you want to explain what that means, because that's what I was reading that confused me. I don't understand what you mean by that. Anyhow. So we've got all these pointers. Nothing is foolproof. And I know we're talking about marriage, but I do want to talk about one more thing, and that is divorce. If you are in a bad situation, if you are not happy with your spouse, get a divorce. It is way too taboo in way too many Muslim communities, and it should not be. If you read stories from the time of the Prophet ﷺ, people were getting divorced left and right. People were getting married, getting divorced, getting remarried, all over the place. It was not seen as a taboo. People seem to think that if you say it's okay to get divorced, that people are just going to do it willy-nilly. People also like to cite lower divorce rates among Muslim communities, but that's not like necessarily a point of pride. We as Muslims should be comfortable saying this isn't working out. And of course, if there's something that's not working out, you want to try and fix it. But we should be comfortable, saying this isn't working out. Divorce is halal. Divorce is okay for us, and we should go our separate ways. If you think that you're staying married for the sake of your children, that's a terrible idea and psychologically damaging to kids. If you think that you should stay married because it's shameful to get divorced, look, I'm coming from a culture where it can be embarrassing to get divorced, but it's not shameful. So it's easy for me to say. I think that it is wrong that there are some places or communities in the world where if people get divorced, it's seen as a huge shame and stigma. But even if it is a huge shame and stigma, if you have the means to, and you're in a bad situation, especially if you're in an abusive situation, you should do it. It is not praiseworthy to stay in an abusive situation. That is not what Allah wants for you. I feel like one of my children is lingering. Hello?
Jude has a poop leak.
All right.
Leaking from his back.
Okay. I don't know if any of you heard that, but I have an emergency situation with a diaper. So I am going to go ahead and sign off. I'm going to leave you with this very last thought. God. Okay. Oh my gosh. The joy of having kids. Okay, so I have to go. I'm going to leave with this last thought, just repeating myself again. The best thing you can do to make sure that your marriage lasts is to get to know the person that you're marrying and make sure you're covering all of your bases. Make sure that you are going to end up with a safe person and a person who's going to be loving and supportive of you. And with that, I have to go deal with an emergency. Not a real life-threatening one, don't worry, but a parenting emergency. So, salam everyone.